Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Resilience Naturally podcast. This podcast is produced by the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica as part of the Jamaica Urban Solutions for the Environment, or JUICE, project. My name is Carol Narcisse, and I'm the Gender and Social Inclusion Specialist with the JUICE project.
And I'm Rashini Clark-Randall, the Nature-Based Climate Solutions Specialist with the JUICE project. Over the next few weeks, we'll be taking you on a journey to explore issues surrounding how climate change, climate action, and gender intersects, and how working closely with nature can help us solve some of the problems we're facing.
And so in this week's show, we're breaking down everything nature-based solutions, because we're using that term and we want to make sure that everyone understands exactly what we're talking about, what these nature-based solutions are, how they can help us solve some of our climate-related, weather-related issues in Jamaica. We all know it's getting hotter. We all know we're flooding at the slightest rain. So how can what we're calling nature-based solutions, can they help with these kinds of issues in an urban setting? These are some of the things we're going to be talking about.
Okay, and so here to help us to go through the discussion are Max Sauerbauk. He's an urban resilience expert on the nature-based platform. So I will let him do his introductions as well. And Miss Uwe Best, a member of Young EcoShape, an international network of young professionals who are in the field of nature-based solutions.
Welcome to the podcast, Uwe and Max.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yes, we are thrilled to have you. So, Uwe, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about your background and, in particular, your work in the area of nature-based solutions.
So much for having me. My name is Uwe Best, and maybe to break a bit of the formality, I'm also from Guyana, Guyana as we call it, and I have a background in coastal engineering and climate resilience. And for the past, I think, 10 years, I've been delving a lot more into the use of nature-based solutions, nature-based adaptation, or nature-based engineering approaches within the work that I do. And as you mentioned, I'm part of the Young EcoShape. But for, I think, over the last 13 years, I've been working in the Caribbean and also within South America, where a lot of my work focuses on the design of solutions for low-lying coastlines, for transport corridors, as well as for wetland systems. Places where the boundary between land and water is constantly shifting. And it's within that capacity that I now work with a company in the Netherlands called Haskoning, which is part of the larger EcoShape network. And it allows me to be able to collaborate on such projects where at least we work alongside the engineering systems to improve the larger resilience of the areas that we do work in. And I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation, because many of the challenges we've been working on in places like Guyana, in Suriname, also in Brazil, connect closely with the issues that Jamaica is also tackling.
Very, very important work. And Max, same question to you, a little bit about yourself and your work in this field. And what exactly, as you're speaking, Max, what are we talking about when we say nature-based solutions?
Well, I'm Max Sauerbauk, but you can just call me Max. And I've been working as an urbanist for the past 8 years. And during my studies, I actually, it's about urban design, but I was always very attracted to making the concept of urban design more tangible, and also with the climate changing, and especially the experience we have in the Netherlands around flooding, dive into how to expand on that and actually make things work. So during my master thesis, I came in contact with a professor who was part of EcoShape as well. And EcoShape is a big consortium that we have of all different engineering companies in the Netherlands, but also universities, but also construction companies. And with the consortium, we actually try to be pre-competitive. So instead of challenging each other in the market, we try to collaborate on things and see how we can actually make things work and have real projects with the main goal of making use of building with nature or nature-based solutions. So for the past years, I've been working on different projects, mostly in urban areas. For example, on the north coast of Java and Semarang, where actually my grandmother is from and was born, so I'm half Indonesian. But I've also lived in the Dutch Caribbean, in Curacao, and I've worked on Bonaire, which is also the Dutch Caribbean, which is a smaller island. And some of the problems might be comparable to the ones you have in Jamaica as well.
And we know that small island developing states globally are disproportionately being impacted by the negative effects of climate change. Can you say a bit about what exactly are we talking about when we say nature-based solutions?
When saying nature-based solutions, it's actually a very wide term, but the easiest way for me to put it is making use of natural processes or the power of nature as a benefit for your problem, which is most likely climate related. I think that's for me the easiest way to put it like that.
Thank you. And that's how I normally try to simplify it as well. So for the audience, so it's using natural processes, systems. We could break it down. We could say that we're using vegetation, rocks, plants to basically harness the power of nature to solve problems that we're facing in the areas we reside. And so, Max, in your introduction, you mentioned a bit about your work in urban design, and that's actually quite an interesting point because there is a linkage between urban design in its tangible form and nature-based climate solutions. So can you kind of explore what that linkage is? So how are nature-based climate solutions making urban design a tangible element of development?
So I think what we see a lot, especially in countries that urbanize very rapidly, there is an urban sprawl where housing is developed in areas that are quite prone to flooding, for example. And I think by using nature-based solutions or building with nature, you have to think on the system as a whole. Mm-hmm. And to get an understanding of all these systems together is, I think, one of the most important things to understand where we are situated and what's causing the damage. Mm-hmm. So, for example, what we see a lot is that when urban sprawl is just everywhere, some floodways that are naturally there get blocked. But then the problem we see is there's flooding. Mm-hmm. But if you turn it the other way around, nature was there first. So actually we are blocking the pathway or the natural flow. So that's also the area where you can have an impact by restoring or even enhancing the natural systems by implementing a nature-based solution or thinking of the use of nature-based solution in combination with other solutions.
So, Uwe Best, you're from Guyana. Much of Guyana is below sea level, and you share that in common with the Netherlands, which also has those issues. So, talk to us a little bit about what kinds of nature-based solutions are possible to respond to, let's take the issue of flooding.
Definitely, Guyana is well below sea level, and so is the Netherlands. And I think it's one of the main reasons why I even chose the field of coastal engineering. Mm-hmm. And through the work of EcoShape, the shift has been over the last decade from seeing nature as a constraint to really seeing it as an asset. Right. And I think when you talk about the application of nature-based solutions or even nature-based climate solutions, it comes first from an understanding of the system, being able to understand the natural processes that govern those particular systems and the interconnectivity between the very high land areas to the low coastal extremes is also quite vital. And once you have that knowledge, it then really guides you, whether it is the application of mangrove rehabilitation, of the use of very permeable structures to protect coastlands, and also to allow for the stabilization of coastlines that allow for mangroves to grow, salt marshes to grow. And that's something that I have been working with the Ministry of Public Works in Guyana for many, many years. Within the urban context, like Max mentioned, solutions are so diverse, from being able to aim towards flood protection, whether it's the bioswales or wetland restoration or wetland management, or being able to have specific areas where you either divert or manage the particular flow in certain areas, or you create more storage in an environment.
So let me, Uwe, if I could just,
please, go ahead.
if I could just stop you a minute.
Yeah.
So one of the things with the podcast is just helping people just understand the terms. Yeah. And you've used the term bioswales just now. What is a bioswale? What does it look like?
A bioswale is more in a way that by using a more permeable structure, instead of using the flow speed, you slow it down, but then the soil or the plants or everything that you add to it becomes a sponge. And it actually comes with more benefits to it as well. So if designed properly, you could say, for example, a park could be the area to retain the water. You can make use of the gullies and bioswales to get the water to there, store it for a while, hold it, and then it becomes a space that can add to the biodiversity, that can be enjoyed for relaxation, that in a way becomes a destination or a place in itself. And I think that's the key concept of building with nature, is understanding all these systems. So the natural system, but also the urban system and the technological system, and then combining those things layer and try to add all the benefits together into a place.
Thank you for that, Max. I love that definition. I especially want to reflect on something you said, which is that traditionally we think of flooding events as, okay, they're going to the concrete gullies and we're just trying to get rid of as much as possible, as quickly as possible. But in thinking of water, for example, as an asset, then we're thinking of how do we harness the water? How do we store it for a while? And so here comes the nature-based climate solution. So there is a shift in the way that we think of nature as well, that will help us to kind of identify nature-based climate solutions that are applicable to the problems that we're facing. So with that, we've touched on bioswales. We heard about wetlands, which is a naturally existing type of nature-based solution. But if we could broaden the minds of the listeners, what are some of the types of nature-based climate solutions that if I want to go and do my research, or if I'm having a problem, whether it be heat stress, drought, flooding, I want to know what are some of the types of nature-based climate solutions that I could think of that could help me to face my issues more efficiently?
Well, I think the power of this is that there's not one solution that fits all, but it's an approach and a system thinking that you can apply to all situations. But for example, one that was quite particular, there in Bonaire a couple of years ago, there was a big sediment plume as a result of rainfall. And it came down along the waterways. And the result was that all the soil was spilled out on the coral reefs. And well, that is a problem because in Bonaire, especially, the coral reefs one of their most valuable assets, also in terms of tourism. So when analyzing the system, like we had a look at where does the water come from and why is the soil coming down, and we want to fix or protect the coral actually. So analyzing the system, we found different problems causing it. So first of all, there was, as I mentioned before, there were buildings in the waterways. But if you go higher and higher upstream, one of the main problems causing it was actually goats and donkeys that roam around and they eat all the plants.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think on the problem, the sediment and protecting the coral, you end up with goats and donkeys grazing and eating all the plants. So the nature-based solution in this case, you could think of, we have to capture the sediment and we have to build, I don't know, all kinds of sediment traps.
Mm-hmm.
But it even might be as simple as fencing a certain area, planting trees that can hold the soil, and then surrounding them by bushes that might deter the goats and the donkeys.
Mm-hmm.
So you can end up with a completely different solution.
Right.
Because you analyze the problem and come up with, but this is actually the source. And there's multiple sources of the problem.
So let's imagine a little bit. We have an urban setting, a town. Our idea of development is very concrete focused. So we are building a lot of concrete structures and they're going higher and higher. We are paving the parking areas. So we have more parking areas, more streets that are hard surfaces. And our drainage and other structures are becoming overwhelmed. What can nature-based solutions do for us in terms of retrofitting that space so that we have less challenges as a result of the way we are developing the space?
It can be quite challenging because when civilization or an urban area is growing quite fast, sometimes it's hard to keep up with, like you said, the growth of the population, and it puts a stress on the system. So I think it starts with understanding that, and preferably there's a governmental body that takes note of that and comes with a vision or a strategy to that. Oftentimes it's not. That's not the case. Then I would say analyze what we have destroyed by building all those buildings. Can we somehow get back to the more original system and the natural elements that were already there? In ways of getting rid of the water in the urban areas, are there places that are now more communal, like a square or something like that, that we can think of designing in a different way and implementing more natural assets, retain water, but also add green and biodiversity that also might have the benefit of reducing heat stress, add more shade, prevent the direct sun onto the concrete, because that all adds up.
And I think that is bringing out the human element of why nature-based climate solutions is more than just a concept, but also an approach to changing the way we do development.
Uwe and Max, each of you, what are some of the, so let's say that we've found natural methods of reducing flooding, retaining water for other purposes. We've found ways to add more green in the urban space, whether that is to buildings, to roofs, small parks, designed with the intention to have an effect on climate, right? So let's say we've done all of those things. What are some of what's being called the co-benefits of designing spaces with more natural features and systems as part of the design? Let me start with Uwe.
Being able to implement these nature-based solutions, in a nutshell, they deliver many benefits for a single investment. So you get climate resilience, less flooding, less heat, more coastal buffering. You get economic gains, especially in sectors where tourism and forestry really depend on healthy ecosystems. But as you mentioned, it's really you also get tangible social and health benefits from cleaner air, shaded public places, and also access to green spaces. It really improves the health of a community. But a more tangible offer that's a bit more sustainable is that they also create job opportunities because, like you said, they're community based. And if you think of restoration, monitoring, maintenance, they all create tangible forms of employment for really communities. And we've done this in so many projects where most of the times, because of the scale of the nature-based solutions, it's best done by the communities, by the people. Of course, it can be organized elsewhere, but the tangible parts of it really come from the communities themselves. So the nature-based solutions don't just protect the infrastructure. I think they really strengthen the livelihoods, support economic growth, and improve the quality of life.
So thank you, Uwe. I just want to interject there actually to ask a follow-up question. So I am an everyday Jamaican. I am not in the technical field. I don't necessarily understand what you mean by biodiversity, biomimicry, urban design, all of that. But I hear this podcast and I'm thinking, okay, how can I be a part of this movement? So what are some simple, everyday ways for the average Jamaican to get in? How can we be involved in creating or designing nature-based climate solutions, even at the household level?
Max, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I would love to go to Jamaica someday to see how the people live there. So I'm trying to use my imagination in the context that I do know.
Yes.
But for example, in the Netherlands, we have a lot of people, they really want to have a backyard. Because, well, being outside in the sun in the Netherlands doesn't happen that often. So if you have a chance, you want to go out to your own backyard. But the people, they also really do not want to get rid of the weeds and everything. So what they do, they pave the entire backyard and they put the chairs and everything so they can enjoy the sun. However, that becomes very hot. So then we have a governance body, for example, the municipality, and they say, okay, if you take out all of your pavement or half of your pavement, we come collect the pavement for free and we give you maybe, I don't know, some benefit to something. So that's, some people take out some pavement tiles or anything. And then maybe they have a percentage of their backyard that is free of pavement. So what happens then is that the rain that pours down doesn't drain in the gullies or the drainage system, but it actually gets absorbed in the ground. If you have one backyard, nothing really happens. Two, a bit more. But if you can convince hundreds or thousands of households to do that, then all of a sudden your entire city becomes a sponge.
So reducing maintenance cost of the built infrastructure that we have, like drains, etc. But there's also the fact, Rashini, that a lot of our water used to be groundwater sources.
But Carol, before you even go there, one what tends to happen when we have flooding events is that even if we were to have groundwater being recharged, being that the water is able to soak through into our underground wells and so, it's polluted. So then another benefit that we can highlight from nature-based climate solutions is that we actually have filtration as a benefit. So
how does the design of the nature-based solution help with filtering the water before it percolates, or as it is going down into the ground?
All right. So Uwe, I will allow you to get into the technicalities of it, but essentially it's the layering of the different types of materials. So you can have stones that probably do an initial gross filtering, then fine sand at another layer. So then you're actually trapping some of those pollutants that would otherwise just get right in. But in terms of the technical design in a simple way, Uwe, can you take that one?
You actually did a really good job of it. So it is essentially just that, the filtering layers from the different types of soils, and that's how it works in nature. And the bioswales that you asked earlier on, it's also the same way in which the bioswale functions. So it collects the water. You have these permeable layers of different soils, which acts to filter the pollutants. And then you're able to literally store and drain that unpolluted or less polluted water safely. So it really does work as simple as that.
So that is going to lead me right into a question I had for you, which is on the matter of biospheres. That's a very good example of a hybrid, more engineered type of nature-based solution. But what is the case really? Is it a more viable approach than using grey infrastructure to deal with, for example, flood management?
By grey infrastructure, you mean?
My bad. So by grey infrastructure, I mean those concrete gullies, those hard surfaces that we tend to use in a traditional sense. So a part of this is, I mean, if I was at the high level in the government trying to make a decision as to whether or not to pursue this as a development initiative, I would be thinking dollars and cents. So is it a viable approach to either replace our systems, which, I mean, that would be tricky, but at least the complement to these grey infrastructure, is it viable?
And it is quite viable to implement them on a large scale. But I think what is important is always looking again at the system. And as Max mentioned, the bioswales serve a purpose. They really manage the runoff and have co-benefits of treating it, etc. But if you have, simply a large discharge expected, then you look for a different type of solution. In the projects that I've worked on, the bioswales have been used as a complementary solution, depending on the discharge expected. But you always have to start with understanding that local context. And it's been applied on a large scale in many countries. And of course, it's not easy to automatically change all of the drainage systems or to convert them into it. But where you have the availability of space and perhaps you're retrofitting an area or you're creating completely new spaces, it gives the opportunity to at least have a climate resilient solution built in.
So this is a good segue to our interview that we had with Ms. Susan Hamilton, Managing Director of Abilities Foundation, because that's an example of an institution retrofitting an area in order to solve a problem, in their case flooding, and how they applied nature-based solutions. Let's give a listen.
Island City Lab has been in partnership with the Abilities Foundation, seeking to transform the school's campus into what they describe as a living lab, demonstrating the effects and importance and practical value of nature-based interventions to solve climate impacts and create co-benefits for the students, the staff, and the broader community. And so we're very happy to be able to talk a little bit with Susan Hamilton, Managing Director of Abilities Foundation, to find out just what difference the nature-based solutions that have been applied on their school campus have been making. Thank you so much for joining us for this podcast, Ms. Hamilton.
Thank you for having me, Carol.
Tell us a bit about Abilities Foundation.
Okay, so Abilities Foundation, our primary objective is to provide quality vocational training for persons with disabilities, aged 17 and up. We are a very unique institution because we serve all disabilities.
Yes.
So in any class, you will find an autistic student, a blind student, a student with neurodivergent characteristics, deaf students. And so we have over the years partnered with Heart NSTA Trust, and the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is our primary stakeholder.
Okay.
And we, of course, partner as well with the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information through their special ed unit.
Right. And when was Abilities founded? When was it formed, created?
October 5th, 1992. So we have been around for quite a while.
You are a demonstration site now for what we mean by nature-based solutions and what some of those solutions look like. And so tell us about what was tell us about the problem that you were experiencing and what the nature-based solutions are that were introduced.
You know, with development comes challenges. And so we discovered that after the renovations to the Constant Spring thoroughfare, we were being heavily inundated when there was heavy rainfall.
Yes.
And Island City Labs just saw the flooding and they approached us. And said they would really like to support, us, to mitigate against the flooding that was taking place. And so a partnership was formed.
Well, before you tell us about the partnership, tell us about the impact that the flooding was having on the school and on students.
Well, from a civil engineering standpoint, it was affecting our buildings. We had a civil engineer that looked at our main building, and it was being affected by the flooding. It was actually sinking.
Oh.
The area to the front of the property, where the students would sit and have lunch and walk around. When it was rainy season, the water just would not drain properly. Yeah. So we were not able to use that portion of the property because once the rain would fall, we were getting mosquito pestilence. Everything was happening on the property that was challenging for the staff and students. We would
were students losing school time because of the flooding that would occur from time to time?
No, not that they would lose time, but especially in months where, outside is cool and the buildings that we're in now, they can be very hot. And sometimes classes, because of the nature of the disabilities, some of our students would want to be outside. We were not able to utilize that area effectively. So the flooding was really affecting the building itself. The grounds, they were not able to play football as they were used to on the grassy area. And so it was affecting the students and staff.
And so the the Island City Lab, which listeners is a very important not-for-profit organization. You're approached by Island City Lab, Ms. Hamilton. They're seeing the flooding that's occurring, one of the unintended consequences of the road widening that took place along Constant Spring Road in Kingston. Tell us what they proposed and whether you had known about the things they were suggesting at that time.
Yes. Interesting question. So we had no idea who Island City Labs were.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
these two, very passionate young people coming to say, Miss Hamilton, we could send in a proposal and we could assist your school. And they just really wanted to get feedback from us. So we were quite open because we were really at a loss.
Yes.
And how would we manage this flooding? And so they sent in their proposal. And what I liked about Island City Labs, in even framing their proposal, they actually included our students with disabilities. And nothing about us without us.
Without us, yes.
So they got their feedback from our students. How would they like the school property to look and feel? And then they started to introduce us to bioswales and river gardens.
Rain gardens.
Rain gardens. We never heard of those terms before.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were quite open to go on this journey with them. And then they submitted the proposal and it was very successful. So from 2023, they have been on board with us.
Okay, from 2023. And so between 2023 and now, you have in place at Abilities Foundation, one of the first institutions with the application of nature-based solutions, or if not the first actually, institution with the application of a nature-based solution, such as a bioswale and a rain garden. So let's talk a little bit about each one, and we're not going to get into the technical side because that's for the experts, but from your observation of the solution, the bioswale is, what does it look like?
We were watching them while they were constructing it. So it has a mesh, it has different materials, stones.
Yes.
They pack it and it's in layers. And then the rain garden, think of a garden, but it's submerged almost like a little pond.
Yes.
And they put plants in there that can handle the water that is being drained from the road. And I can tell you, Kingston has been having heavy downpours. Even now we're speaking and it's raining heavily in Constant Spring.
Yes.
And when you go outside, you see the water being collected in the rain garden and being transported straight down to our farm, because Abilities also, we have a farm called Herb Time. And so the water is harvested and circulated through to the farm. And so we actually see it in real time. And the students can actually look and see how the water is being drained from the bioswale to the rain garden. It's amazing. And now, we can actually go around the front of the property even after a heavy downpour. And to give you a practical example, our feet are not going way down in the dirt because it was almost very swampy. But now that is being drained. And so we see the physical results from the implementation of these nature-based solutions.
Excellent. This is just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Because sometimes you say to people rain gardens, bioswale, and you might describe what goes into them, but people may not quite believe that they can actually work efficiently to manage stormwater and to manage runoff and to direct the water in a way that does not result in, it averts the flooding that you had been experiencing before. And as you said, because it's designed very intentionally, then that water you're saying is being channeled to the farm. And,
yes,
and
it is.
and being retained for
Yes,
purposes of the farm. So it's a whole system then, correct?
exactly. It
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Yes, very interconnected. And then we have seen where what Island City Labs, they gave us a walkway around it. So it's very relaxing. That's the other part that's so aesthetically pleasing, but also promotes wellness among our students and our staff.
Yeah.
And so after school, I have team members that are exercising around the walkway. I
Yes.
have students that are or autistic students. So when they have a meltdown in class, we have them and the shadows just walk around the rain garden and it relaxes them. We find that they are autistic students. They love that area and they use it. They love nature. And so when they're having challenges in the classroom, we use that area as a kind of meltdown area. They look at the plants. Even although traffic is traversing, they find themselves in a more relaxing mood.
And so in the field of nature-based solutions, what you're talking about in the technicality of it is that there are co-benefits to using nature-based solutions. The co-benefits meaning multiple benefits, and it's well documented that when you implement nature-based solutions, they solve the issue that you're trying to address, in your case, flooding. And then they have all these other benefits, the well-being, the sense of well-being, the calming. And are you finding that it's a social space that students or teachers and others are sort of interacting in that space?
Yes, very social, Carol. We find that even for lunchtime, the students are under the tree and they are enjoying the space. And also, even though abilities is fairly accessible, a lot of our wheelchair students were not able to access that area because it was always very swampy. But now our students that have to use their wheelchairs, it's fully accessible for them. They're going on the lawn. So they feel like the entire campus is now fully accessible. They don't have any barriers. They can also go and enjoy nature around there.
Excellent.
Our blind students are also, I'm noticing that they're counting their steps as they walk around. So they have a fair idea how to navigate the area. It is just awesome. Awesome.
Yes. Wonderful news. So it offers you a learning space as well for teaching the students and incorporating it in your curriculum. Would that be correct?
Yes,
in
that
terms
would
of
be the next stage. So we're really wanting to partner more with Heart now in looking at creating a green collar workforce. And that's the next stage because we have the actual mechanism, a living lab that we can teach our students how, and we're looking forward to the following stages of implementing the nature-based solution. And also what we're trying to do is to educate our students about the plants that are a best fit for this NBS, nature-based solution, and have them do tours. So when you and EFJ and you come to abilities, our students will be taking you around there and telling you how it operates. So a tour guide, we'll be training them to be tour guides. So
so lots and lots of benefits and spin-offs in addition to having solved the flooding problem. Ms. Hamilton, we are so excited to hear of the ways in which nature-based climate solutions are operating on your school campus, the Abilities Foundation, Constant Spring Road in Kingston. And we are looking forward as the Jamaica Urban Solutions for the Environment project at the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica. We're really looking forward to partnering with the school, with Island City Lab, to support some of the next phases of their intervention. We really are grateful to Abilities Foundation for all the work that you do and for being the pioneer in demonstrating what nature-based solutions can do. Thank you so very, very much, Ms. Hamilton,
Thank you so
for
much
joining
for
us.
having me. Thank you so much, Carol, and the EFJ team. Thank you.
You know, in the last minute or two that we have for the conversation, let me just ask if there is nothing else that anyone remembers when they've listened to this conversation, what are two things you want folks to take away, understanding about what nature-based solutions are and what they do for us?
In a nutshell, simply put, nature-based solutions are actions that protect, restore, or work with natural systems to help reduce climate-related or particular risks such as flooding, heat, coastal erosion, drought. Governance is really an important element in being able to structure how these solutions happen and are implemented, but also the opportunities that communities can then gain or to have by having certain community-driven actions implemented. There's always this misconception that there is no space to implement nature-based solutions in dense cities. But it's simply not true. And they can be integrated in the smallest ways into infrastructure that already exists, whether it's the roadside corridors through the trees, the drains through the combinations for the bioswales, or even along your coastal fronts. Really taking small, tangible efforts definitely adds up when it's applied across a very large area.
And while you have the floor, Uwe, can you just say a little bit then about Young EcoShape? What is that, and how can listeners benefit from maybe going on your website? What kinds of resources are there?
EcoShape in itself, it really brings together a very large diverse group of actors, so engineers, ecologists, social scientists, as well as NGOs and government partners. And within that umbrella, young professionals are really supported through the Young EcoShape to build long-term capacity for climate resilient development.
So
you can check the website to find materials and also to connect directly.
Ecoshape.org, or what's the website?
Ecoshape.org.
Okay, great. Max, your two takeaways, and as well tell us about the Nature-Based Solutions platform. How can people be benefited from interacting with the platform?
Yeah, as a summary, I think try to slow things down, understand the environment you are in, and try to look around and see what's happening. And that can be on a small scale, for example, with the gardens, like I said, or on a bigger scale if you're more into analyzing a bigger system. And also trust that when you're with many, even like a small intervention can help a lot. And like Uwe said, there's always space to do something. And by doing a lot of small things, you can actually convince the government to do stuff otherwise, because it becomes a proof in itself in a way. And sometimes you just also have to experience and to pilot. That's also how EcoShape was founded years and years ago. They started with pilot projects. They had some ideas, got funding together. They did it on a bigger scale, but they started, and instead of just studying, they started with a pilot, and then they monitored, and then they saw what happened. They adjusted, collected more data, and said, okay, maybe we have to change this and that. But by steering, it becomes a more, how do you call that? It becomes more of a flowing movement instead of a fixed solution. It can grow, it can shrink, it can go left, it can go right.
It's adaptable.
And by adaptive, that was the word I was looking for. By adapting with it, you learn a lot, actually, because you can think on everything beforehand and it always comes out different,
and
whatever you do.
The Nature-Based Solutions platform, Max, what is that? And can listeners visit that platform? What kinds of resources are there?
The LinkedIn, it comes with all tangible solutions. It showcases projects around the world. They have short, informative videos. They do infographics, and there's just a lot of streams of information to be found and inspiration. And I think there's already around 60 or 70,000 followers on LinkedIn and growing still. And they can always reach out to us like you have before, either through EcoShape or the Nature-Based Solutions platform. And I think our main drive is to help make the world more beautiful and more biodiverse and great space to live in.
And so on that note, we thank you both very, very much for joining us for this episode of the podcast Resilience Naturally, a podcast produced by the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica as part of the Jamaica Urban Solutions for the Environment JUICE project. Want to thank Max Zuckerbuck, urban resilience expert and part of the Nature-Based Solutions platform in the Netherlands, and Uwe Best, member of EcoShape and a Caribbean girl from Guyana. And thank you both very, very much for helping us to break down what we mean by nature-based solutions and some of the types of those solutions and the way in which they benefit place as well as people. So thank you both very much. I'm Carol Narcisse.
And I'm Rashini Clark-Randall. You can keep up with the Resilience Naturally podcast and everything the JUICE project and the EFJ are doing by following the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica on social media. On Facebook and LinkedIn, just search for the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica. And on Instagram, it's _EFJ. And visit our website at www.efj.org.jm.
Join us next time for another episode of Resilience Naturally. Thank you very much, Uwe and Max.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having us.